see how fluffed up and dark red they are. They're also feeling very, very chilly in the morning wind. Nibbling away, having some breakfast. They are truly beautiful antelope. Sometimes we don't get to spend enough time just looking at them. You can see that incredible two-tone colour with the darker on the top and then the lighter on the bottom. And as I'm sure many of our regular viewers know, but maybe not some of the newer viewers, that's actually an interesting method of counter shading. So because the sun is usually shining, not today obviously, but there is more light coming from the sky, it helps to counterbalance it. And for predators that see in black and white and grey, it helps to disguise the fact that this is a three-dimensional animal and helps it blur into the background. You wouldn't think it, but just imagine with the sun shining on top on that darker patch, it lightens it ever so slightly and almost turns the animal two-dimensional if viewed in grayscale. Oh, too far from the herd. Wait for me, wait for me. Catch up. He looked up and suddenly realized that he was all alone and that the rest of the herd had moved off, been distracted by feeding. And you don't want to be an impala on your own. That was a young male, probably about 2 years old, going to join the rest of the herd. Now, I wish that we could get a good view of the females. Unfortunately, they are really, really tucked away in there, sheltering from the wind. But I'm definitely starting to see the first signs of the ewes looking rather bulgy in odd places. And there's just signs of spring absolutely everywhere. It's like looking at a different area from last week to this week. We're still puzzling over this mystery bug. There's a lot of different answers coming through, and I do thank you for that. Lisa G, you said it almost looks like got gecko coloration with those camo dots. And Pretty Nightmare, you've come up with a very clever name as well. So there's so many different options coming through. I'm trying to look at it really, really carefully, just so we can start to narrow it down. Turn it slightly like that. Pretty Nightmare's name for this wonderful camo bug is Djuma bug, which I think is maybe what we should stick with. We'll classify it as that and carry on from there. Tilt it down slightly. Look at how amazing those colors are on it. What are you? You are a mystery to me. Trying to get a good look. It's got that sort of velvety look to it that moths have. I'm wondering if it's something along those lines. Going to have to get hold of an insect book a little bit later and see if we can puzzle this one out and then give a proper answer. I'll post it on my newly formed Twitter account. It's actually not newly formed. I've had it for many years. I just have never used it. But I've made a stern resolution to start. I think we need to really get down and answer this question as to what this mystery bug might be. smaller shrike species. And I think you might be right. I'm going to double check with Scott and with Steph when he gets back from Hoedspruit, and we'll see if we can figure it out. The cool thing, of course, about the fact that we do these live safaris every day, twice a day, is that we'll be able to come back and have a look and watch and see what bird is coming to and fro from that area. I'm going to take a quick loop onto our eastern boundary, onto Cheetah Cut Line, see if maybe we can spot something there. Now, I'm sure that Scott filled you in on that update of the report of the cheetah moving east from Simbambili sometime yesterday evening. Oh, there's just ellies everywhere today. Just to show you quickly before we find a good position. I thought I saw a dark shape that wasn't quite a tree or a log. Seems to be an elephant-filled morning. Okay. Well, since we did have to leave our other elephant herd, and I know that some people were really enjoying that sighting, let's see if we can get a nice view of this herd and see how many there are and what they're up to. Now, a little bit earlier, Christopher had asked me if I'd seen that elephant with the shortened trunk. Now, for those of you who might be new viewers, a couple of weeks ago I saw an elephant with a short trunk that was possibly an old snare injury, most likely an old snare injury, that had healed up completely, but you could see how she had to work a little bit harder to wrap her trunk around things. Just looking for the best way in to see the elephants. And it was an elephant that I became very attached to, just watching her having to work a little bit harder, struggling to wrap her trunk around the food that she was eating. And Christopher, you were wondering if I've seen her again or if I found a name for her, because I did mention that I was rather attached to her. And the answer to that is I actually haven't seen her since that day. She was with her young calf and then probably a slightly older daughter. Just finding a nice way in. And by nice, I'm largely meaning to try and avoid knocking Andrew out with a branch. I feel like I did a lot of that yesterday. And we've made our way around off-road, only to encounter another road where most of the elephant herd is residing. I'm going to move forward a bit, or maybe not. Let's see. There's two young bulls fighting ahead of us. And they've been sparring, it's just play fighting. And I'd love to get a nice view of them. But the trick with young sparring bulls is to remember that if one of them feels like he's losing, he might come to try and show us how big he is. Not in a threatening way, just in a playful kind of approach. And sniffing the air, getting an idea. That's that trunk movement that he's doing. He's just getting a sense of what's happening out here, as well as sending a body language message to that other bull that he's been fighting with. What are you thinking? There you go, he's going to turn around and start pushing against the other bull. Let's move forward and catch them in the act. Nice and in the open in the road. I hope they continue with their play fight because it has been highly entertaining. It just seems to be one of those mornings where we spend a lot of time with elephants, which I'm definitely not complaining about. Come on, you two. You're not done playing yet. see in his body language that swaying from side to side, restless movements. Still thinking about it. Behave yourself. Hello, my boy. Hello, big boy. Stop. There. Hello. Yes. Stop what you're doing. Now, there's no need to be too nervous about this. He's just throwing his weight around a little bit. Yes, you're very big. Now turn around. Go back. Now what that was a perfect example of is a young bull, teenage boy. He's been play fighting with his buddy, so he's feeling pumped up and full of adrenaline, and he's decided to come and push his weight around. And it's quite a crucial age for elephants around this time. It's about the time he's going to start leaving his herd. And he's just experimenting with his limits and learning a little bit about that. So that big approach, ears open, trunk up, that was an attempt at an intimidation technique. Now if I had switched on and driven away, he would have chased us all the way down the road because it was fun. There you go, back to wrestling with his buddy. But how cool is that? Get to experience a little bit of fun and playful elephant behavior. Andrew and I had mentioned just a little bit earlier that they were going to come up and do that, which is exactly what he did. Now, by raising my tone, and I'm sure you would have noticed, his body language changed immediately. And that's why I speak to elephants. I don't think for one moment that they understand what I'm saying. Some rumbling from mom and calves there. They're probably also a little bit on edge from these two males pushing around and fighting and playing, because young bulls don't always look where they're going when they're acting like this. And we are surrounded by them, so it might have put them slightly on edge. But anyway, that change of tone, that is just enough to get the message home to a young bull like that who's just pushing his limits a little bit. Another cute little baby. We really have been spoilt with little baby elephants. Now we heard those rumblings from the various females to each other and to their babies. And Deb from Florida, I do hope that your weather is a little bit warmer than ours is at the moment. Deb was wondering how much males communicate. So we know that females communicate. Sorry, Deb, I'm going to reposition and then answer your question, just so we can get these two bulls and the action that's happening ahead of us. I promise you I will respond to you. But we're going to see them pushing into the herd. We're going to see the females getting a little bit upset. I'm not going to push too hard or too close. Just get us into a nice open area. Well, open-ish. Now, unfortunately, we can't follow too closely because that's a recipe for problems with upset females and two fighting males. The females will get cross with us, especially in this dense vegetation. He's coming again. There they go. Pushing against each other, and this is just pure play fighting. Clashing tusks. You can hear, I'm going to be quiet for a moment so we can hear their tusks knocking against each other. of course, as I said that, they stopped what they were doing. So for the meantime, I will carry on. Oh, here we go. Again. No, I think reluctant to carry on and pushing into the thick block. There's more angry females up ahead. I'm not sure if you heard that squeal. That was probably from a calf. Oh, he's going to... It's very difficult to see, but he's actually almost mock mounting the male in front of him. And that's part of this whole dominance display and part of the whole fighting routine. Generally, male animals will mount other males as a way of showing a dominance sign. It's not a sexual thing in this particular instance. We can hear the screeching of the other elephants off into the distance. As I said, I'm not going to drive into this very thick block to try and follow on with the action, because we're only asking for trouble if we do that. But I can hear lots and lots of elephants in the area. What I might do is just do a loop around and see if we can catch up. This is obviously a big herd. I can hear them far away as well. And I think today seems to be Elephant on Djuma Day. There's just ellies absolutely everywhere. Now, I was, before those two males distracted me, I was busy answering Deb's questions. So I'm going to start up the vehicle and drive a loop, and I will carry on answering that. Now, Deb, you wanted to know about male communication systems. So we hear the females rumbling to each other, but we don't hear the males as much, although they will trumpet and screech at each other in a play fight like that if it gets a little bit out of hand. The elephants have left a convenient roadblock as well, a rather thorny, inconvenient roadblock. Now the males can and will communicate in the same way as the females, but I'm not sure how else. Now we know that elephants are capable of communicating in frequencies so low that we actually can't hear them. The human ear is incapable of hearing them. So we get those bass rumbles every now and again, but they actually transmit frequencies so low that travel through the ground for large distances and allow them to communicate with other members. And you see them occasionally standing with their toes on the ground, and that's because they've got special receptors built for almost listening through their feet, which is quite phenomenal to think about. Now, in terms of male communication, I know that they can and will communicate, but the extent to which they do is probably less than the females. But a really interesting question from Deb, and actually something that I'm going to go and look at, especially in areas where the elephant herds are vastly spread out, huge areas around Tanzania and Botswana. I'd love to know what studies have been done into male elephant communication. Very interesting, because they do lead such separate satellite lives to the females. They only really interact when there's a chance for breeding. But a fascinating encounter nonetheless, and what a treat we've had this morning. So many different elephants encountered. We've had the little baby, and then the males fighting and playing. Awesome stuff. Had a wonderful moment with that young male, and it's almost like a battle of wills when something like that happens, just because they're coming to test you, and it's all important how you respond. And that level of response just comes from spending quite a lot of time with elephants and watching their body language and getting to know their different responses. But Laura, you were wondering what my most awesome elephant experience has been to date. Oh, that's a really, really difficult question to answer, because I really love elephants and I've spent so many amazing hours with them. I think if I look back to one of my earliest memories as a guide, was my first very close elephant encounter with guests like that, and there was less posturing from the bull that came up. He just came up and looked at us, and he put his trunk out. I never let elephants touch my vehicles. I don't think it's a good habit for them to learn, but he just moved his trunk over the front of the vehicle. He came up and looked at me, completely relaxed. I just told everybody to sit very, very still, and we got to enjoy that moment, and there was just this profound sense of peace that he was radiating. It was almost like he was trying to tell me to just relax, to be calm in his presence. And I've never ever forgotten that feeling of absolute awe that you get with him. And it's happened to me a few times since. The special moments are with the older males, the big bulls who are really comfortable in themselves, but also sometimes with the females. And I've been surrounded by older females before who've come through, we've taken them by surprise, and they've come to investigate, and they all stop dead. There's no clear communication that we can hear, but somehow they just know. Everybody stops and they surround you and they look at you intently. And somewhere I've got a video of one of those moments. Oh, so many awesome Ellies. I can't even begin to pick. There was New Year's Day. It was actually Old Year's night, and I was at work, but we'd arranged a whole braai out on the top of a view site overlooking a river where I used to work a couple of months ago. And we had the whole the biggest bull on reserve, whose name we haven't thought much of it. Parked the vehicles, everybody got out having a wonderful time, eating and having a few drinks. And the next thing, one of the interns goes, elephant. And this enormous bull in must walked straight past us. He was 10 meters away on the road, maybe even less, probably even less from the closest person. And the vehicles were on the other side of him. And there was nothing we could do. He was totally relaxed. He knew we were there. He'd chosen to come and visit us. And it was as the sun was setting on Old Year's night to bring in the new year. I mean, how awesome was that? Such a special moment. And he just walked up, stopped and looked at us. We all sat very, very still, and then he carried on. And Lexi, my puppy at the time, she was very young. She was maybe 8 weeks old, but she'd seen a lot of elephants in her 2 or 3 weeks in the bush prior. She just sat and watched him. It was such a peaceful setting, and there was no point at any moment that any of us felt threatened. Okay, it's definitely raining more than it was earlier. And during that elephant encounter, I felt entirely comfortable with the actions of Andrew sitting at the back, because I know that he's been in this situation many times before. But we've had quite a few Ellies over the last few hours. They've been perfectly relaxed with our presence. And Amy was wondering if they would be that relaxed if we'd had a vehicle full of tourists behind us. And yes, probably, but that depends very much on the way that you approach the sighting. Whenever I'm with guests and I'm coming into elephants, I always tell them to sit still, sit quietly, especially if the elephant decides to come close. It's all about communicating with your guests. And if you communicate well with your guests and they're nice and relaxed, they're nice and quiet, then absolutely the elephants will be fine. And they will be perfectly chilled out. And especially if you know that I always avoid elephant sightings if I know that there is somebody who is a little bit afraid of elephants. And if I do have an elephant approaching, what I have learned to do is just to tell people to stay still, keep their movements slow, get your videos going now if you want to, but don't be fiddling and looking for cameras if there's an elephant right next to you. And it's all about, again, reading the body language of the elephant. You can usually, not always, you never ever work with complacency, but you can usually predict what it is they're going to do and how they're going to approach you. I've also heard stories, and these are stories, it's not something I've ever tried, but I've heard it from one or two people. Elephants at night can often be a little bit different, especially if they're suddenly caught in headlights. They might be a little bit more unsettled. And I've heard a story from a very experienced guide of mine who was my boss previously, and he drove into the middle of an ellie herd without realizing it was pitch black. All of a sudden there were just elephants all around him, and quite upset with his sudden appearance in their midst. And he said he sang the South African national anthem to them. Now I've heard him sing, and I wouldn't consider a particularly relaxing tone, but he said it worked absolutely with the elephants. They calmed down, moved off, carried on feeding. Now, it might have been more to do with the fact that he was stationary, but you never know. Buffelshoek is a very quiet and very drizzly morning. But Bob the Bachelor is here. Just take a moment to have a look at him. He doesn't seem to be up to much, sheltering as well from the cold. And you'd be surprised how well the water works for regulation. Now we've just had the most amazing sighting with, first we had the breeding herd at the beginning of the morning, and then we had that mixed breeding herd of young males with the young babies as well. And Diana, who is from Lancashire, where I spent a good few holidays when I was studying in the UK. I was actually staying in Wigan, Diana. Wonderful place. Luckily I experienced it during the warmer times of the year. But Diana, you wanted to know how it is that the males relate to each other, or relate to the calves that are in the breeding herd. Will they get to know them on a personal level? Now for calves, for bulls that are born into the herd, they will be related to all of the other calves to come. So as they grow up, they reach their teen years, they will still be very, very familiar with those calves. They won't interact with them to the same extent that the older females might, but they will still spend a bit of time with them. They might play with them a little bit and just be very gentle and also very protective of them. Once they leave the herd and they start to visit other herds that they're not related to, generally they tend to stay away from the calves, just because especially the mothers tend to be quite aggressive in defending them from the presence of other males. They can be a bit bulky, a bit distracted, as we saw with those fighting teenagers. Occasionally they forget themselves, and there's always a chance that they might bump into a baby and knock it over. But the mothers are very, very defensive. That being said, elephants are incredibly complex animals, and a young bull visiting a herd that isn't related to him, there's nothing to say that it couldn't go up and say hello to a baby that isn't related to it in any way and just investigate it and get to know it. They are really, really complex social beings, and they have a lot happening in their heads in terms of the way that they relate to each other. And there's a great deal happening that will never begin to understand. So I definitely wouldn't put it past them, Diane. I just spotted a saddle-bull stalk there. I'll reverse. Can you get it from that angle, Andrew? Or shall I reverse a bit? Cool. That's why I was distractedly all of a sudden looking off to the left. Wonderful birds. birds are slowly starting to come awake in this drizzle. And I've mentioned this before, just while we're watching this stork scooping through, just to wrap up our wonderful day spent with Eddies. I would absolutely love to spend a day in the life of a mind of an elephant and really get to know how it is that they interact with each other. They really are the most phenomenal and special creatures. You can see in a big dam like this how much of it is a matter of luck for this stork. Basically just stabs in the dark, so to speak. This water is very, very murky. And while we are looking at a bird and we're still trying to solve the mystery of that shrike, we've got some information from some of our viewers saying it is definitely not the redback shrike nest that we were looking at earlier, because they are northern hemisphere breeders. They are not southern hemisphere breeders. Well, I've definitely learned something today. I knew that they were migrants. I didn't realize that they were non-breeding migrants. So we'll have to keep searching for the answer to our mystery bird nest. But thank you for that information. I'm quite surprised. I don't know why I had it in my head that redback shrike were breeders in this area. But thank you for the correction. I obviously had the wrong idea in my head. The cool thing about the season change is we're starting to see so many bugs coming through. Although it does mean that animals like that poor stork have to work a little bit harder to catch fish in a bigger dam. But Siberia, who is one of our zoomies, our wonderful zoomies who control the webcams that are set up 24 hours a day at Djuma and Arathusa waterholes, Siberia mentioned that she would love to see a water scorpion when they start to come out. Now, Siberia will definitely be keeping an eye out for them. I know that you miss the assortment of bugs and insects that we get. Ooh, the wind is blowing. We'll definitely be watching out for them. And of course, now that the rains have come and are possibly arriving in the next few minutes, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that they don't. But although we're getting more rain, so we're getting more and more insects, and we'll definitely be showing you them. I'm going to be sitting with an insect book this afternoon and brushing up on all of the rusty patches that I now have in my knowledge, and having a look and see what we can find you that's interesting. I'm not going to go wandering down to the dam. I know that Bob the Bachelor might not appreciate the intrusion on his personal space. He's been watching us very closely out of the corner of his eye, just to make sure we're not up to any mischief. I still want to see if we can relocate those ellies, and I wanted to do another quick loop around and just see if they're going to pop out on, what's that road called? Drawing a blank. Magic Quarry. Yes, Magic Quarry Road. Close to Quarry Pan. That's where I'm going. Oh, the Franklin are making a noise. Thank you, Andrew, for acting as windscreen wiper in the drizzle. Leave Bob for now and head out. What an awesome morning this has been. Let's see what else we can find to show you. If you are a new viewer like Jennifer, who sent through an observation earlier, stick around and keep watching, because there's always something new to tell you and to teach you in this area. And there's so many exciting things to share with you. It's the thing that I love, or one of the aspects that I love the most about the bush, is that I enjoy it the most when I'm able to share it with and share my interest and all the little intricate details. If we can get those through to people, it's one of the most special things you can do out here. Even on a cold and drizzly day. Has been a rather ellie-filled morning. Thought I'd give a little bit of an update on the elephant sightings that we've had up until now. Obviously we had, just a few moments ago, we had that encounter with those young and spirited bulls, but earlier this morning we had a beautiful moment with a really young calf. It was only a couple of months old, still wobbly on its legs, still a little bit uncoordinated with its trunk. And it lay down and slept for a good few minutes, quite a long time, completely asleep, passed out, with mom standing by and auntie standing by to protect it. And Chris, you were wondering if it does start to rain, which it really kind of is really starting to drizzle. You were wondering if the mommy elephant would stand over and shelter her baby. And that's definitely a possibility. I've always wondered how they experience rain, if they love the feel of it on their skin, or if they find it discomforting after a while. We really just don't know enough to know how they experience it, but it is possible. I have seen mothers standing over their babies before, not necessarily as a shelter for rain. I'm not sure just to say that they would deliberately do it to shelter them, but it is possible. And as I said, elephants are quite complex beings. They've got a lot going on in their minds and in their heads that we don't necessarily always fully understand. Andrew's just trying to shelter the camera slightly, trying to make a tent. We're going to be okay, Andrew, or do we need to get some?
We may have to link the camera.
Okay. Andrew's just letting me know that there's quite a lot of water now coming down. I'm not sure what Scott is experiencing across where he is in Arathusa, but we're starting to get fairly heavy down here. We're going to have to cover up our equipment fairly soon before the water does any damage to it. We're going to try and continue for as long as possible, but just really hoping that we can stop and cover up. What's happening here? Now, we are going to have to at some point call it quits. It is raining here and apparently at Arethusa as well, so unfortunately we might have to be ending the show a little bit early. But the monkeys are shouting at something. What is down here? Look at his body language. Very unhappy, looking down on the ground. Oh, leopard! There we go, that's what he's shouting at. Here we go. And that looks to me like the Queen of Djuma as a special surprise for the end of drive. How cool is that? Wow, we have had quite the morning. And I told you that's the amazing thing about live safaris. You just never know what you're gonna get. How cool is this? Let's stay with her for as long as possible. How amazing is this? What an awesome way to be ending up our morning. I'm going to drive nice and carefully. I'm learning some tricks about Karula and the way that she operates. Where is she going to go? It's very, very dense bush ahead of us. We're going to try and stay with her for as long as possible. That monkey was the perfect alarm system. Look at that, guys. What a beautiful moment. I'm going to stay with her for as long as possible. I'm going to try and loop ahead of her. Yeah, Andrew's telling me that the rain is getting very heavy. We're going to have to call it quits soon. Let's try and get a nice view of her to end with. We don't want to cause any damage to our equipment. Switch off for a moment and let's watch this beautiful cat. Now unfortunately, because it is drizzling hard, we are going to have to close down fairly soon. But what a beautiful surprise, what a beautiful, amazing moment. You can still hear the monkeys shouting out, alerting everyone to the presence of this beautiful cat. You can see how thick the block is getting. Now my experience with this particular leopard is she's quite a sneaky girl. Very capable of picking a direction and then disappearing off into it. She's about to do. Karuna's just making her way into the drainage line south of Magic Quarry Road. Trying to keep up with her through this block. Now for new viewers, I know this must seem fairly dramatic, but you can see how relaxed she is to our presence. She's barely looked at us at all. These cats are very, very chilled out with the presence of cars. She is going to disappear into a drainage line very soon. Beautiful girl. And I think the monkeys gave the game away. She's not terribly impressed. Awesome, awesome stuff. On a perfect path. Nice and quiet and silent. She's going to duck down that drainage line. I'm not going to be able to follow her. But at least we've had this wonderful brief glimpse of the mysterious Queen of Djuma. Now, unfortunately, we are going to have to close the show early. I'm looking at the camera and it is just covered in rain. And she has ducked off into this drainage line, so there's a very, very good chance that we're not going to be able to relocate her without damaging some of our important electronic equipment. So for all of our regular viewers and our new viewers, a big, big thank you from both Scott and myself. We have unfortunately got to end the show before we cause any more damage. And a big thank you to Andrew for all of his wonderful work. Oh, the rain's getting hard. And to Jess and Nikki and FC and Eugene. We will catch up with you for the sunset safari, but for now we have to cover up. Goodbye guys, have a wonderful day wherever you are.